The observation deck of the International Space Station Unity was supposed to be empty at 300 hours. Emily Parker knew this because she'd specifically chosen this time for her nightly ritual of stargazing, seeking solitude after her shift in environmental systems. What she didn't expect was the sound of something massive moving in the darkness. Her first instinct was to retreat. After all, the Unity's newest resident, the 9-foot-tall Zentarian warrior who'd come aboard last week, was known to roam the station during night hours. But curiosity had always been Emily's blessing and curse. Instead of backing away, she pressed herself against the cool metal wall and peered around the corner. The sight took her breath away. Krokthar, the Zentarian military attaché, moved with impossible grace for someone his size. His four-armed form flowed through combat forms that seemed more like a deadly dance than practice. In the starlight streaming through the reinforced windows, his scaled skin shifted colors subtly, blues and silvers rippling with each movement. Emily had seen recordings of Zentarian warriors before, but they didn't do justice to the real thing. The warrior spun, his movement punctuated by a low growl that made the deck plates vibrate. Two of his arms held ceremonial blades that caught the starlight, while his other two hands moved in precise patterns she didn't understand. Emily realized she was watching something few humans had ever seen: a Zentarian warrior practicing their sacred combat forms. She must have shifted her weight or made some small sound because Krokthar suddenly froze mid-motion. His head turned toward her hiding spot, secondary eyelids flickering in the darkness. "You need not hide, small one," his voice rumbled through the chamber. "I can hear your heartbeat." Emily considered running. It's what most of the crew did when they encountered the Zentarian warrior in close quarters. Instead, she stepped out into the observation deck, her boots clicking softly on the metal floor. "I'm sorry for interrupting," she said, forcing herself to meet his golden eyes. "I didn't mean to intrude on something private." Krokthar's head tilted slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Yet you stayed to watch." "It was beautiful," Emily said before she could stop herself. Then, to her own surprise and his visible shock, she applauded. "Really beautiful. Like a dance, but deadly." The Zentarian warrior's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of confusion she'd learned in her xenobiology briefings. No one had ever described the sacred combat forms as beautiful before, least of all a human barely larger than one of his arms. "You are not afraid?" Krokthar asked, his deep voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. Emily shrugged, trying to project a casualness she didn't entirely feel. "Should I be? You're a warrior, not a monster. There's a difference." For a long moment, Krokthar stood perfectly still, all four arms relaxed at his sides. Then he did something that made Emily's jaw drop. He laughed. It was a deep, resonant sound that she felt in her bones. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Emily Parker of Environmental Systems. You know my name." "I make it my duty to know all crew members who might cross my path," he replied. "Though you are the first to stop and watch rather than hurry away." Emily walked closer to the observation windows, gazing out at the stars. "Well, they're missing out. What you were doing. It's part of your warrior traditions, right? The night forms." Krokthar moved to stand beside her, his massive frame making her feel particularly small. "The Karthak forms. They are practiced in darkness because a warrior must be one with the void." He paused, then added, "Few outsiders have shown interest in our ways." "Their loss," Emily said simply. She turned to face him fully. Would you mind if I watched sometimes? I promise to be quiet and stay out of your way. It's just that I come here most nights anyway, to look at the stars and clear my head after shift." The Zentarian warrior studied her for what felt like an eternity. His secondary eyelids flickered once, twice, and then he nodded slowly. "You may watch, Emily Parker. But know this, once a Zentarian warrior accepts an observer to their forms, it creates a bond of trust. Do you understand what that means?" Emily thought about it carefully before answering. I think so. I won't betray that trust. Krokthar, you have my word. Then let us observe the stars together, small one. And perhaps, he paused, mandibles clicking softly, perhaps you will tell me why humans find such peace in these lights that are long dead. As Emily began explaining human perspectives on stargazing, she realized something important had just happened. She'd gone from being just another crew member to becoming the first human to forge a personal connection with their Zentarian guest. And somehow, standing next to this massive warrior in the starlight, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She had no way of knowing that this moment would change not just their lives, but the relationship between their species forever. Emily's datapad chimed with message after message as she made her way to the Unity's mess hall. Word had spread fast about her late-night encounters with the Zentarian warrior. Most were concerned warnings. A few were outright accusations of compromising station security. She ignored them all. The mess hall doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the usual breakfast chatter died immediately. Krokthar sat alone at a corner table, his massive frame making the reinforced furniture look like children's toys. 4 empty tables surrounded him, a perfect circle of fear that no one dared breach. Emily loaded her tray with her usual breakfast: coffee, scrambled eggs, and toast. She could feel the stares as she walked purposefully toward the Zentarian's table. Captain Rodriguez caught her arm as she passed. "Parker," he whispered urgently, "there's plenty of open seats. Don't feel like you need to." "With all due respect, sir," Emily cut him off, keeping her voice low. "I know exactly what I'm doing." She continued her walk to Krokthar's table, painfully aware of the silence following her every step. The Zentarian warrior looked up as she approached, his secondary eyelids flickering rapidly. "Mind if I join you?" Emily asked, already pulling out a chair. "You should not," Krokthar rumbled, though he made no move to stop her. "Your kind fears to eat with my kind. They believe we might. What is your phrase? Snap and eat them instead." Emily snorted coffee through her nose, causing several nearby crew members to jump. "Sorry," she wiped her face, laughing. "It's just, you're eating synthesized protein cubes. Pretty sure humans aren't on your diet plan." A low sound emerged from Krokthar, something between a growl and a chuckle. "You understand our dietary restrictions. I read the cultural briefing." Unlike some people, she shot a pointed look at a group of engineers who quickly turned away. "Besides, according to Section 7, Paragraph 3, Zentarians can't eat in the presence of potential enemies. So by sitting here, I'm officially declaring myself a friend." Krokthar's massive hand stilled over his food. "You studied our customs." "Well, yeah. Seemed rude not to, considering we're sharing a space station." The mess hall had begun to buzz with whispers. Emily caught fragments. "Lost her mind. Career suicide. Probably compromised." Krokthar's voice dropped lower, concern evident in his tone. "Your crewmates disapprove. This will cause you problems." Emily shrugged, taking a deliberate bite of toast. "They'll get over it. Besides, I'm curious about something. That movement you were practicing last night, the one with the crossed arms. It looked like it had a specific purpose." The warrior's posture changed subtly, pride entering his voice. "The crosswind strike. It is designed to." He stopped abruptly as Lieutenant Chen dropped his tray, the clatter echoing through the hall. "Sorry," Chen mumbled, clearly unnerved by being so close to their table. Emily rolled her eyes. "Ignore him. You were saying about the crosswind strike." What followed was the first public conversation between a human and a Zentarian that didn't involve military protocols or diplomatic niceties. Emily asked questions about combat forms while sharing stories about human martial arts. Krokthar, initially reserved, gradually began to engage more fully, his deep voice carrying across the mess hall as he explained the philosophical foundations of Zentarian combat. Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Hayes approaching their table, his face stern. "Parker, a word." Emily sighed. Standing. Duty calls. Same time tomorrow. She asked Krokthar. The warrior's mandibles clicked once. She was learning this indicated consideration. You would risk further censure to share another meal. Try to stop me, she grinned, then followed Hayes out. In the corridor, the commander turned to her. Parker, what you're doing is building diplomatic relations, breaking down barriers, following the Unity's actual mission statement about fostering interspecies cooperation. Hayes pinched the bridge of his nose. It's disrupting crew dynamics. People are uncomfortable. People are prejudiced, Emily corrected. Krokthar has done nothing threatening since he arrived. He's here as a military attaché, trying to understand us, and everyone's treating him like he's going to go berserk at any moment. He's a member of a warrior species 3 times our size with enough strength to tear through bulkheads. He's also a person, Emily said firmly. A person eating alone every day because we're too scared to treat him like one. That ends now, at least with me. Hayes studied her for a long moment. This is going in your file. Add a note that I'm following Zentarian cultural protocols to the letter while doing it, Emily replied, turning to leave. She paused, looking back. Oh, and Commander, you might want to read Section 12 of the cultural briefing about how Zentarians interpret isolation during mealtimes. We're lucky Krokthar is more diplomatic than we are. As she walked away, Emily smiled to herself. She'd seen Krokthar's mandibles tick upward slightly as she defended him. The Zentarian equivalent of a smile. Tomorrow's breakfast promised to be interesting. In the mess hall, Krokthar sat motionless, listening to her departing footsteps with all 4 hands folded in the traditional pose of deep thought. Humans, he was learning, were full of surprises. You want me to what? Krokthar's voice echoed through the empty cargo bay, his secondary eyelids blinking rapidly in succession. Emily stood before him in workout clothes, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Teach me some basic forms. You said yourself that understanding comes through action, right? So teach me. Emily Parker, you are 1/3 my size. Your bone density is insufficient. Your muscle mass is totally irrelevant if I'm learning for understanding rather than combat, she interrupted. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? Death, Krokthar stated flatly. Okay, what's the second worst thing that could happen? The Zentarian warrior made a sound she'd never heard before, something between a sigh and a growl. Your human humor continues to baffle me. Is that a yes? Krokthar straightened to his full height, all 9 feet of him looming over her. If I agree, you must swear to follow my instructions exactly. The forms are not toys. I swear, Emily said solemnly, then ruined it with a grin. Sensei. What is this sensei? Human term of respect for a teacher, though I guess I should use the Zentarian term. What do students call their combat instructors? Karthak 4, Krokthar replied. Though no human has ever. He stopped as Emily bowed slightly. Thank you for teaching me, Karthak 4. The cargo bay fell silent. Emily worried she'd somehow offended him until she noticed his mandibles clicking softly. He was deeply moved. Very well, he finally said. We begin with the first form. Watch carefully. What followed was simultaneously the most humbling and hilarious experience of Emily's life. Krokthar moved through a seemingly simple sequence, a preparation stance followed by 3 flowing steps. When Emily tried to replicate it, she immediately lost her balance and sprawled across the deck. Sorry, she scrambled up. Let me try again. The second attempt wasn't much better. Neither was the third, or the fourth. By the 5th try, she'd managed to stay upright, but her movements looked more like a drunk giraffe than a warrior's grace. Perhaps we should stop, Krokthar began. No, Emily straightened, determination blazing in her eyes. Show me again. Slower this time. And, she hesitated, maybe you could guide my movements, like human martial arts instructors do. Krokthar tilted his head. Guide? Yeah, like, she mimed the motion. Help position my arms and stance correctly. The warrior considered this for a long moment. Such physical contact between teacher and student, it is not done among my people. Oh, Emily's face fell. Cultural taboo. No, Krokthar rumbled. We are simply too strong. The risk of injury is minimal if you're careful, Emily finished. I trust you. Those 3 words hung in the air between them. Among Zentarians, declarations of trust were sacred things, not given lightly. Finally, Krokthar moved behind her. 2 of his hands gently gripped her shoulders while the others hovered near her arms. The first form begins with the spine aligned thus. He adjusted her posture with incredible gentleness, weight centered, like the core of a star. For the next hour, they moved through the form together. Krokthar's guidance was precise, his strength perfectly controlled. When Emily stumbled, his hand steadied her instantly. When she succeeded, his mandibles clicked in approval. Better, he rumbled after she completed her 20th attempt. Though your left foot. Emily's legs chose that moment to give out entirely. She sat down hard, laughing despite her exhaustion. Sorry, Karthak 4. Human stamina has limits. You are injured. Concern rumbled in his voice. Just tired. And I'll be sore tomorrow. She grinned up at him. But I did it. I mean, badly. But I did it. Why do you smile? You have not mastered the form. Because I'm learning something new. Something no other human has ever learned. Her enthusiasm was infectious. Krokthar's secondary eyelids flickered in what she now recognized as amusement. You are. He paused, searching for the right words. Not what I expected, Emily Parker. Is that a good thing? It is. Interesting. He offered 2 of his hands. Come. You should rest. As she let him pull her to her feet, Emily noticed something remarkable. Hey, you did it. Did what? Helped me up without hesitating about strength control. Guess we're both learning new things. Krokthar went very still, realizing she was right. Then he did something unprecedented. He laughed, a full, deep sound that filled the cargo bay. Same time tomorrow? Emily asked, stretching her aching muscles. You wish to continue, despite the difficulty. Are you kidding? I just learned the first step of an alien martial art. Of course I want to continue. She headed for the door, then turned back. Unless you don't want to teach me anymore. Krokthar's mandibles clicked in what was definitely amusement now. I will teach you, small one. Though I fear for my reputation when other warriors learn I have taken a human student. Hey, maybe I'll surprise them. Emily Parker, he rumbled. You already have. Routine maintenance, my ass. Emily muttered, checking her tether for the 3rd time. The hull breach in Section 7 needed repair, and naturally, she'd drawn the short straw. At least she wasn't alone. Krokthar floated nearby, his massive EVA suit making him look even more imposing against the backdrop of stars. You are nervous, he observed through the comm. Not nervous, just respectfully cautious of the infinite void trying to kill us. The void is not trying to kill you, Emily Parker. His mandibles clicked in amusement, visible through his specialized helmet. It simply is. Very zen of you. Hand me the sealant gun. One of Krokthar's 4 arms extended the tool, which Emily took with a nod of thanks. They worked in comfortable silence, her smaller size allowing her to reach the damaged areas, while he anchored them both with his superior strength. That's when everything went wrong. The first explosion was barely visible, a small puff of debris from a nearby sensor array, but the shockwave hit them like a hammer, sending them spinning away from the hull. Emily's heart stopped as she felt her tether go slack. Status. Krokthar's voice boomed through the comm. Tethers shot. Emily fought to control her rotation, trying to spot the station through her tumbling view of stars. You. Similarly compromised. Can you reach the emergency thrusters? Emily's hands scrambled for the controls on her suit. Nothing. Negative. Impact must have damaged them. She finally managed to stop her spin, only to feel her blood run cold. The station was slowly receding, and her oxygen gauge showed damage. Krokthar, I'm losing atmosphere. 15 minutes max. There was a moment of silence. Then, unacceptable. Emily watched as the massive form of Krokthar used his intact thrusters to move toward her. His golden eyes blazed through his helmet's faceplate with determination. What are you? Be still, he commanded. Using all 4 arms, he caught her with remarkable gentleness despite their relative velocities. Now we think. Emily forced herself to breathe slowly, conserving oxygen. Okay, we're about 50 meters from the hull. Your thrusters work, but they're designed for your mass. With both of us. Insufficient thrust to return, he confirmed. However, she recognized his tone. I'm not going to like this plan, am I? I can throw you. What? His secondary eyelids flickered. She could see it even through the helmet. Centaurian muscles, even in EVA conditions, can generate significant force. A precise calculation of trajectory, accounting for your mass and the station's position. You want to literally throw me at the station. Emily's voice rose an octave. Yes. That's insane. Even if you could get the angle perfect, I'd be moving too fast. I'd bounce off or splat against the hull. Not if you execute the first form. Emily stared at him. The landing stance. But that's designed for absorbing and redirecting force, yes. His massive hands adjusted their grip on her suit. You have practiced it 73 times. On solid ground. In normal gravity. Not hurtling through space. The principles are the same. You must trust your training. He paused. You must trust me. Emily looked at her oxygen gauge. 12 minutes now. Then at the station. Then at the warrior holding her life in his hands. The angle has to be perfect. I am a Centaurian warrior. My aim is always perfect. Despite everything, she laughed. You know, if someone told me a month ago I'd be letting a 9-foot-tall alien throw me through space, I'd have called them crazy. If someone told me I would trust a human with warrior teachings, I would have questioned their sanity as well. His mandibles clicked. Ready? Emily took a deep breath, positioning her body as they'd practiced so many times. Wait. What about you? You'll drift further out. I have 40 minutes of oxygen and a working distress beacon. The station's shuttle can retrieve me. His golden eyes met hers. Now, Emily Parker, show me what you have learned. She nodded. Do it. Krokthar's 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, spinning them once to gain momentum. Emily focused on the hull ahead, mentally rehearsing the form. At the apex of their spin, she felt his grip tighten fractionally. Karthak, he roared, the traditional warrior's battle cry. Then she was flying through space. Everything her training had taught her warred with basic human instinct. The hull rushed toward her at terrifying speed. Her mind screamed to curl up, to protect herself, but instead, she forced her body into the first form. Impact. Her magnetic boots struck the hull first, knees bending precisely as taught. Her arms moved through the pattern that redirected force, and somehow, impossibly, she stuck the landing. The force rattled every bone in her body, but she held. Hands shaking, she activated her backup magnetic locks and collapsed against the hull, laughing hysterically. I did it. Krokthar, I actually did it. Of course you did. His voice came through the comm, proud and amused. You are my student. As she pressed the emergency panel to trigger the airlock, Emily grinned. Next time we practice emergency maneuvers, can we do it inside the station? There is no honor in easy victories, small one. Yeah. Hang tight. I'm getting the shuttle prepped. And Krokthar, thanks for not letting me die in space. His response was pure Centaurian. Death in the void is only acceptable after a lifetime of glorious battles. You have not yet earned such an end. You say the sweetest things. Emily laughed, already running through the airlock. She had a friend to save. The Zentarian diplomatic vessel dwarfed the Unity station, its crystalline hull reflecting starlight like a predator's scales. Emily watched from the observation deck as it docked, her stomach churning with anticipation. Ever since the announcement of the High Council's visit, Krokthar had been different, distant. "They're here because of me, aren't they?" she asked as her friend joined her at the window. "Yes." Krokthar's voice was heavy. "Word of our friendship has reached the Council of Elders. And that's bad." Before he could answer, the station's intercom crackled. "Parker, Emily, report to Conference Room Alpha. Immediately." Emily straightened her uniform. "Well, guess I'll find out." "Wait." Krokthar's massive hand caught her shoulder. "There is something you must know." "Parker." "Now." The intercom's urgency cut him off. "Tell me later." She tried to smile, but his expression made it fade. "That bad, huh?" The conference room was packed with an impossible mix of humans and Centaurians. 3 council elders dominated one side, each larger and more intimidating than Krokthar, while Captain Rodriguez and Commander Hayes represented the Unity. Emily felt very small as she took her seat. The eldest Centaurian, his scales a pale silver, spoke first. "You are the human who presumes to learn our secret arts." Emily sat straighter. "I am the human whom Krokthar has honored by teaching, yes." The elder's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly. "You speak our formal patterns." "Interesting." His massive head turned to Krokthar. "You teach her our ways of speech as well." "She learns what she observes," Krokthar replied carefully. "Her mind is quick. Quick enough to mock our traditions." The second elder growled. "To turn our sacred combat forms into entertainment. I would never." Emily's outburst drew every eye in the room. "Sorry, but that's not what this is. I asked to learn because I respect your traditions, because I wanted to understand." "Understanding is not your right," the third elder rumbled. "Our ways are for warriors." "Then test me." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. The room went deadly quiet. Even Captain Rodriguez's face paled. The first elder leaned forward, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak. "You wish to undergo the trial of recognition, a test that has killed full-grown Zentarian warriors." Emily's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "If that's what it takes to prove my respect is genuine, yes." "Emily, no," Krokthar started. "The human accepts." The second elder's mandibles clicked in what might have been satisfaction. "Let it be done." "Now wait just a minute." Captain Rodriguez stood. "Miss Parker is a Unity crew member. You can't just—" "I volunteer." Emily cut him off. "Sir," she added quickly. "Parker, this is suicide," Hayes hissed. The first elder raised a massive hand for silence. "You understand, small one, that failure means death. That no non-Zentarian has ever survived the trial." Emily thought of quiet nights watching the stars, of breakfast conversations that broke barriers, of learning to fall correctly in the cargo bay, of being thrown through space and surviving. She thought of Krokthar's patience, his hidden humor, his unwavering honor. "I understand," she said firmly. "But I also understand that friendship, real friendship, is worth risking everything for." Krokthar made a sound she'd never heard before, something between a purr and a growl. "I stand as her Karthak for," he declared formally. "Her honor is my honor." "You would stake your own standing on this human." The third elder's tone was incredulous. "I would stake my life on her courage," Krokthar replied. The first elder studied them both for a long moment. "Very well. The trial will commence in 6 hours aboard our vessel." He fixed Emily with his golden gaze. "I suggest you make peace with your gods, small one. You will need their favor." As the room emptied, Captain Rodriguez grabbed her arm. "Parker, I'm ordering you not to do this." "With respect, sir, you can't. I'm volunteering for a diplomatic challenge. Refusing would cause an incident." "Living is better than an incident." "Is it?" She met his eyes. We're supposed to be out here building bridges between species. Sometimes that means taking risks. Hayes shook his head. Your funeral. Once they were alone, Krokthar turned to her. You have no idea what you've done. Then tell me, what exactly did I just sign up for? The trial has 3 parts: combat, endurance, and spirit. Each would challenge a Zentarian warrior. For a human. He paused. There is no shame in withdrawing. Emily thought about it, really thought about it. Then she grinned. You know what humans say about impossible odds. What? They make victory taste sweeter. She punched his arm playfully. Besides, I have the galaxy's best teacher. So, Karthak 4, what do I need to know? Krokthar's mandibles clicked in resignation. First, we must discuss how to survive being hit by someone 3 times your size. As they walked to the training area for one final session, Emily refused to consider the possibility of failure. After all, she had already done the impossible once. She'd made a Zentarian warrior smile. The next challenge was just a matter of staying alive long enough to do it again. The Zentarian ship's combat arena was a vast hexagonal chamber with walls that seemed to drink in light. Emily stood in the center, feeling impossibly small in the ceremonial training garb Krokthar had given her. The fabric, designed for Zentarian proportions, had been hastily modified but still hung loose in places. The trial of recognition has begun, the first elder's voice boomed from above. Combat first. Survive 5 minutes against Karthal. A door rised open, and Emily's heart nearly stopped. Her opponent was even larger than Krokthar, with battle-scarred scales and all 4 arms corded with muscle. He carried no weapons. They weren't needed against someone her size. Remember what I taught you. Krokthar's voice carried from the observation area. Size is not spirit, Emily finished under her breath, dropping into the first form stance. Karthal laughed, the sound like grinding stones. The tiny one plays at being a warrior. I will try not to break you too quickly. Emily didn't respond. Her mind raced through everything Krokthar had taught her. In combat against a larger opponent, movement is life. Let their strength become their weakness. The massive warrior charge. Emily waited until the last possible moment before diving into a roll. Not away, but between his legs. She came up behind him just as Karthal's momentum carried him forward, unable to stop his bulk quickly. Her hand struck a precise point behind his knee, just where Krokthar had shown her the scales were thinnest. Karthal roared in surprise as his leg buckled momentarily. He spun with shocking speed, all 4 arms sweeping out to grab her. But Emily was already moving, using the second form's flowing steps to stay just out of reach. Stand still, insect. Why? Emily ducked another grab. Because it's dishonorable to evade. Or because you can't catch me. That got her what she wanted. Rage. Karthal's attacks became wilder, more predictable. She didn't try to block or return them. Any direct contact would mean instant defeat. Instead, she turned the arena into a deadly dance, letting his own strength work against him. 3 minutes in, she was drenched in sweat but unharmed. The observing Zentarians had fallen silent, watching as she wove between Karthal's strikes like water through stones. Then she made her first mistake. Her foot caught on the loose fabric of her borrowed guard. She stumbled, just for a moment, but it was enough. One of Karthal's massive hands caught her midsection, lifting her off the ground. Now, he growled, we end this embarrassment. Emily couldn't breathe. His grip was crushing. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. But through the pain, she remembered Krokthar's words during their training. Asterisk, a warrior's greatest weapon is not strength, but the willingness to endure. Asterisk. She forced her eyes open, met Karthal's gaze, and smiled. The expression seemed to startle him. In that split second of confusion, Emily pulled her legs up and kicked out with every ounce of strength she had left, striking the same spot behind his knee. The warrior's grip loosened just enough for her to slip free, rolling away as she gasped for air. 4 minutes, called the elder's voice. Carthel approached more cautiously now, his secondary eyelids flickering in what might have been respect. You smile at pain. Perhaps there is something of a warrior in you after all. Emily couldn't speak yet. Her ribs felt like they were on fire. But she managed to get back into a fighting stance. Her vision swam, but she refused to fall. The final minute was a blur of motion. She had no strength left for fancy maneuvers, running purely on instinct and Krogthar's training. Twice more, Carthel nearly caught her. Each time, she slipped away with millimeters to spare. Time, the elder announced. Emily collapsed to her knees, coughing. She looked up to find Carthel standing over her, all 4 arms crossed. You did not try to strike me, he observed. Only to survive. Wouldn't, she wheezed, wouldn't have done any damage anyway. Why waste the energy? To everyone's shock, Carthel laughed. Wisdom in battle. Yes, you have learned something from Krogthar after all. He extended one massive hand. You have earned the right to stand, small warrior. Emily took the offered help, swaying as she rose. Thanks. I think you cracked some ribs, though. You smile even now. Human thing, she managed. We laugh at pain when we're proud of earning it. From above, the first elder spoke again. The combat trial is complete. The human has survived with honor. Emily looked up to where Krogthar watched. His mandibles were clicking rapidly. Worry, pride, and something else she couldn't identify. Rest, the elder commanded. The trial of endurance begins in 1 hour. As medical staff approached to check her injuries, Emily heard Carthel addressing the other warriors. Did you see? When I had her in my grip, when death was certain, she smiled. Perhaps. His voice dropped thoughtfully. Perhaps there is more to these humans than we knew. Emily closed her eyes, letting the medics work. 1 trial down. 2 to go. And she was just getting started. Emily's muscles screamed as she held the warrior's pose, a position challenging even for Zentarians. She'd been maintaining it for 2 hours in the ship's gravity chamber, which was set to twice Earth's normal gravity. Her borrowed garments were soaked with sweat, and her recently treated ribs throbbed with each breath. Your arms shake, small one, the second elder observed from the chamber's edge. Perhaps you wish to yield. No, Emily managed through gritted teeth. Around her, 3 young Zentarian warriors had already dropped out of the endurance trial. Only she and 1 other remained. Your body fails, the elder pressed. Why continue? Emily thought of Krogthar, who wasn't allowed to watch this portion of the trial. She remembered his words. Endurance is not about not feeling pain. It is about choosing to continue despite it. Because, she gasped, I made a promise. The gravity increased again. The last Zentarian warrior fell with a growl of frustration. Emily's vision blurred, but she held the pose. Her arms felt like lead, her legs like jelly, but she refused to fall. Fascinating, the third elder rumbled. Even now, she maintains form. Emily had stopped feeling her extremities about 30 minutes ago, but somewhere in the haze of pain and exhaustion, she'd found something unexpected. Peace. Her mind drifted to her early morning practices with Krogthar, to the simple joy of learning, to the friendship that had brought her here. Enough, the first elder's voice cut through her delirium. The trial of endurance is complete. Emily collapsed as the gravity returned to normal. Medical staff rushed forward, but she waved them away, struggling to her feet alone. It took 3 attempts, but she managed to stand. The human passes, the second elder asked, incredulous. She outlasted 3 warriors, the first elder noted. More importantly, observe, even now, she chooses to stand. Emily swayed but kept her balance. When does the spirit trial begin? You can barely stand. The third elder scoffed. Yet you would continue. Try to? Stop me. The elders exchanged looks, their secondary eyelids flickering rapidly. Finally, The first elder spoke. The spirit trial begins now. Face your final challenge, Emily Parker. A door opened, revealing a familiar figure. Emily's heart sank. Krokthar. Her friend and teacher stepped into the chamber, his expression unreadable. I am to be your final trial. I don't understand. The first elder's voice was solemn. To complete the trial of spirit, you must strike Krokthar with killing force. Prove that you have truly learned our warrior ways. Emily stared at them in horror. What? No. It is tradition. The second elder stated. A warrior must prove they can set aside personal bonds for duty. Emily looked at Krokthar, who stood motionless. You knew. This was coming. It is our way, he said softly. I am sorry, small one. Emily's mind raced. Everything hurt. She could barely stand. And now they wanted her to attack the one person who had believed in her. She thought of all their shared moments. Stargazing, training, meals together. She thought of him saving her life in space, of teaching her with endless patience. Then she understood. No, she said clearly. The third elder's mandibles clicked in anger. You refuse the trial. I refuse to betray everything Krokthar taught me. Emily straightened despite her screaming muscles. He showed me that being a warrior isn't about killing. It's about honor. About protecting what matters. Pretty words, the second elder sneered. But you fail to understand our ways. No, Emily's voice grew stronger. You fail to understand your own teachings. Krokthar taught me that true strength comes from bonds forged in trust. That honor lies in lifting others up, not striking them down. If your tradition demands I destroy that lesson to prove I learned it, then your tradition is wrong. Absolute silence fell over the chamber. No Zentarian had ever dared challenge the trial of spirit. Krokthar's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly as he stared at her. You would forfeit your chance at recognition, the first elder asked quietly. After coming so far, I would forfeit my life before betraying what friendship means. Emily met his gaze steadily. Kill me if you must, but I will not strike my teacher, my friend. More silence. Then, unexpectedly, the first elder laughed. The sound rolled through the chamber like thunder. Do you see? He addressed his fellow elders. She shows us our own blindness. We test warriors with combat, endurance, and death. Yet we forgot the greatest test of spirit, the courage to stand by one's principles, even in the face of tradition itself. You mean, the second elder began. She passes, the first elder declared, not despite refusing to fight, but because of it. She shows us a warrior's spirit we had forgotten could exist. Emily swayed, relief making her dizzy. Krokthar moved to support her with two of his hands. Did I? She whispered to him. Did I just change his Zentarian tradition? His mandibles clicked in what she now knew was joy. No, small one. You reminded us of what it truly means. As consciousness finally fled, Emily smiled. She'd come seeking recognition as a warrior. Instead, she'd shown an entire species a different kind of strength, the kind that comes not from the ability to take life, but from the courage to protect it. 1 year later, Unity Station Training Center. You're dropping your left arm again. Emily called out to the young Zentarian warrior who towered over her. Remember, the first form isn't about power, it's about balance. Yes, Karthak 4, the student replied, adjusting his stance. Around him, 3 other Zentarians and 2 humans moved through the same form, their movements synchronized despite their size differences. Emily smiled, still not quite used to hearing the title from Zentarian warriors 3 times her size. She caught Krokthar's eye from where he observed at the room's edge, his mandibles clicking in amusement. The Unity Zentarian Cultural Exchange Program had started small, just her and Krokthar teaching a few curious souls from both species. Now, 6 months after its official launch, they had a waiting list. Better, she praised as the students completed the form. Take 5 everyone. Hydrate according to your species' needs. As the students broke formation, Emily walked over to Crockthar. "You're awfully quiet today." "I am remembering," he rumbled. "1 year ago, you could barely complete that form without falling. And now I'm teaching it. Universe has a sense of humor." Their conversation was interrupted by Commander Hayes entering the training center. "Parker, Crockthar, your next batch of students has arrived." Emily turned to see 5 nervous-looking human cadets and 3 young Zentarian warriors, all trying very hard not to stare at each other. She recognized the looks, the same mixture of fear, curiosity, and hope she'd felt a year ago. "Welcome to Basic Cultural Combat Training," she announced, moving to stand before them. "I'm Emily Parker, and this is Senior Warrior Crockthar. We'll be your instructors." One of the Zentarians shifted uncomfortably. "We are to learn from a human." Instead of taking offense, Emily smiled. "Actually, you're going to learn from each other, Crockthar." Her friend stepped forward, his massive form making the new arrivals instinctively step back. "What you see before you," he gestured to the mixed group of current students still practicing, "is the future. Not just of combat training, but of understanding." "The Zentarians have a saying," Emily continued. "Strength flows from unity." For centuries, they thought it meant unity of purpose. But maybe it also means unity between peoples, between species. She nodded to one of her advanced students. "Sarah, show them the bridge form." A human woman stepped forward, accompanied by a Zentarian male. What followed was something entirely new. A combat form that incorporated both Zentarian power and human agility, the 2 warriors moving in perfect complement to each other. "That's impossible," one of the new Zentarian students whispered. "Funny thing about impossible," Emily grinned. "It just means no one's done it yet." The demonstration concluded to stunned silence. Emily looked at the new students' faces, seeing the first cracks in their preconceptions. "1 year ago, I stood where you're standing. Scared, uncertain, but curious. I had a choice. Let fear win, or take a chance on understanding someone different from me." She gestured to Crockthar. "Best decision I ever made." "But how?" one of the human cadets asked. "The size difference alone." Size is not spirit. All of Emily's current students chorussed, a mantra they'd heard countless times. "You'll learn that there are many kinds of strength," Crockthar added, "many kinds of courage." The Zentarian Council now recognizes this truth, thanks to one small human who refused to accept limitations. Emily felt her cheeks warm. Anyway, who's ready to make history? As the new students began their first tentative interactions, Hayes approached Emily and Crockthar. "3 more stations have requested similar programs," he said quietly. "You've started something bigger than any of us expected." "No," Emily corrected, watching as a tiny human cadet helped a massive Zentarian adjust his stance. "We've started something exactly as big as we hoped." "Right, Karthak 4. Krokhthar's secondary eyelids flickered with pride. "Indeed, though I believe you have earned a new title." He turned to face her fully, his voice taking on the formal tone of Zentarian ceremony. "Emily Parker, who has shown courage in the void, honor in combat, and wisdom in peace, the Council of Elders has granted you the title of Karthakmar, Master of Warriors. You are the first non-Zentarian to hold this rank." Emily stared at him in shock. "When were you going to tell me?" "I believe I just did," he replied, mandibles clicking in amusement. She punched his arm playfully. "You're getting better at human humor. And you are getting better at Zentarian formality. Sometimes." They turned back to watch their students, humans and Zentarians, moving through ancient forms together, creating something new with every step. Somewhere in the universe, Emily knew, other species were watching, learning that strength could bridge any gap, that courage wore many faces, and that friendship could change worlds. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. Krokhthar's response carried all the certainty of the stars. "Until the void claims us, small one. Until then and beyond." And in that moment, on a station floating in endless space, the impossible had become simply the first step toward something greater. End.